We'll get started with but yeah, so thanks, folks. So we have a fantastic panel of graduate students here with us today to talk about their experience navigating community engagement and how that impacts their academic, personal work. My name is Corey Sprinkle. I'm the Community Engaged Scholarship, Community Engaged Scholarship Specialist here at the Think for a moment. And I get to work with all of these folks here, unfortunately. So excited to hear what they have to share. I have a couple questions to ask to get things going, but welcome y'all's questions. And this is super informal, so let's get into it. Maybe if you each just want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about like what your community engaged, what your entry point in community engaged research has been. Yeah, how do you got where you are?
Jules, I'm a grad student in geography and history, so finishing up, hopefully fingers crossed next year. And so I think my entry point would be, prior to grad school, I worked as a community organizer in food systems in a few different places around the country, and really fell in love with that sort of process of like being really embedded in the community and goals and priorities, and doing a lot of work around driving those goals. When I started my PhD program, I actually intended to do international work. I've lived abroad in Malawi and had like connections to the village where I was working and living, and thought that that would be a really good place to do international participatory research. I went there in the summer 2018, really long time ago this time, and I was there for 6 weeks, and basically through that process realized that given the timeline that I had in my dissertation, and also like the funding I had and just the research skills I had, I really didn't feel like I was able to complete truly participatory research. Like it felt very extractive, and I felt like I was sort of bumping up against walls in terms of like the politics of international research, and it just didn't feel like it could be authentic. Also, I realized that I was at a place in my life at that point where I wasn't looking to like split my time between two completely different communities. I was really wanting to be embedded in, my own community, and I think that's a really important piece of community engagement that maybe we don't like fully talk about all the time. But I knew what I wanted my life to look like, and I was straddling two different places, and so I kind of realized that in the second year of my PhD program, sort of took a step back from that research and was trying to renavigate like what my PhD could look like. At that point, I started working out as an employee at Morgridge Center, which is a farm table restaurant out in Florida. And I just sort of started working there just like as an opportunity to like become a better community member in rural Dane County, and wasn't keeping an eye on story research at all, or community research at all. But through that time that I spent at Morgridge Center as an employee, I developed relationships with the owners, and 6 months later, at the start of the pandemic, they applied for a grant for the project that would basically become my community research. So I'll talk more about that project later, I'm sure, but that's actually because of those connections. They reached out to me and asked if I wanted to be a partner, and I said yes, and now here we are like 3 years later, and it's been this grant, so.
Hard to follow that. I'm Vignesh. I'm also a graduate student in geography, and I also came to community research after like doing community organizing after graduating from undergrad, and I did community organizing around the climate crisis, and did a lot of popular education work. And when I came to graduate school, I really wanted my research to be able to inform popular education and how communities are working with each other to engage other people in the community, to bring them into community organizing work, or just like bettering each other's lives. And so my current research is with the community organization, basically Thriving Up and Moving, which is based in New York City and works with working class South Asian and Indo-Caribbean workers, youth, and families. And yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. I'm trying to apply some of my research and popular education experience to kind of like bringing the two together. And I think I'll talk more about that in the future, but yeah, that's how I came to it.
Hi, I'm Catie. Thanks for being here on a busy time of the semester. So I, similarly to these two, came to community work here at the university through doing a lot of environmental and food system advocacy work. Prior to coming back for a PhD, I was based out in Missoula, Montana, and I was really interested in food systems. So I had sort of worked my way through a kitchen out of the Wedge Community Co-op in the Twin Cities, and then worked on a farm, and then did a very community embedded master's program in environmental studies, and then worked for multiple different nonprofits doing food systems and environmental advocacy work. And I, similar to Jules, really fell in love with sort of being embedded in the community, and really loved that. But living out of Missoula, increasingly felt the pull back towards home, which is the Madison area for me. And so I, for a couple of years, was thinking about that. And then my partner and I decided to move back to Madison. And I ended up starting a PhD here, my second year back. And my journey into that was I was really interested in not just food systems, but farmland loss around the area is a really big deal here. And so I was interested in sort of what are the competing interests of farmers who are new and looking to get on land that's increasingly expensive, but still be proximal to an urban center, and then also sort of urban needs. And you know, those are sometimes competing interests, but how can we make them complementary? And so, yeah, I sort of work at in mostly rural contexts as well, and I struck up Jim about a year ago to work out in Mount Horeb, which is the community where I'm from. So we'll get into that more later, but
yeah, so I think my experience has been a little bit different. I'm a first year master's student in the counseling psychology program, which I think is a little bit different from what we heard today. And so I think my journey with like community engagement is a little bit different in the way that I think it started in my undergrad. I was a community-based learning intern for the Morgridge Center. And I applied because I have taken community-based learning courses, and I really I felt like those were the courses that really like spoke to me, and like my values of like being community facing and like centering on the community needs. And so after that, I graduated, and so right now I'm the community engagement and preparation grad assistant. So my work is really looking at like how do we prepare students to do community engagement in a good, like in a manner that will create like mutually beneficial relationships and not just like one-sided or like coming from like this ivory tower. So I think that's something that, although I'm not like specifically working with the community partners, something like that, I'm still kind of like somewhat engaged with the community and like influencing how like the kind of community engagement that is being done. So yeah, that's kind of the perspective that I'm bringing into this space.
Cool. Keep going on the line, or whoever wants to start. But so what more specifically is your community engaged research or work, and like what does it look like on the ground or day to day?
you wanna do
Okay. Like day to day, like I think it's thinking about what are the needs for the community, like how, and I think one of the like aspects of my work right now is also assessment. So I'm like interviewing community partners and faculty to also get their perspectives of their experiences with like having some of like our workshops or Canvas modules integrated into their courses. And that's like an ongoing project that I'm also developing because I also supervise 2 student interns, and so I was going through like the hiring process. But in terms of community engagement, I think a big like thing or like a big challenge and something that we're like really working on right now is looking at like how are we providing support to like our BIPOC students who are doing community engagement, and really looking at like what are we missing, what should we add to like our workshops or like our Canvas courses, and like thinking through some of those things, and like continuously developing that. So I think for the most part on an everyday basis, it's like continuously like but like scheduling time to like meet with community partners or faculty, and also just checking in with students and see how they're doing, especially like BIPOC students, given a lot of like things that happen outside that really influence students' experiences. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of a little bit about like, which may be very different, but yeah.
The important work here. So about a year ago, Jules and I got a grant from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, which is a organization that works across the US and then also internationally to do different sorts of planning activities around housing and, you know, basically any topic that you could imagine. And so they put out a call for a food system planning grant, and Jules and I decided to apply with the Not community in mind, in partnership with some folks out there. And we ended up getting the grant along with I think 5 other projects that were from all over the world to do food systems planning. And so we approached this project from sort of a different perspective than the other grantees, because we there's not an organized like planning agency, or like local government doesn't really have planning in the same way that a lot of like large municipalities do. And so we took a really grassroots sort of organizing approach towards our planning process, which we heard from the institute was highly unusual and unique. And so basically over the past year, we've just been talking to community members about their needs and priorities as they think about the future of their town and their food system. And so we've been really centering those community voices as leaders in the community. And all of that work has led up to a workshop that we had together with 20 community leaders working in the food system. That includes farmers, food business owners, some people who started a community garden, some people from a local food assistance organization called Neighbors Helping Neighbors. And so a bunch of different types of people leading this work. So yeah, I think that is what it has looked like day to day on the ground. Maybe Jules can speak to that a little bit more, but I guess one of the things that was really important for the work was really taking an assets-based approach, where we were thinking about, we heard a lot about the abundance of resources in the community rather than that more deficit model of what does this community need and what doesn't it have. And so that's been a really centering theme for us in doing that work. But yeah, that's been the past year, I think. Talk about that project. I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah, so my community-based research is with this organization, Drum, and I had gone into starting my research 3 years ago now with very low expectations, but just some ideas of like wanting to study their community work after 9/11 and how it's developed since then. But while I was doing research, one of their members, a delivery worker, was hit and killed by the police while working, and it became a really big like rallying issue for the community and the organization. And so from there, it kind of developed into like this collaboration around like investigating how like police interactions with delivery workers and workers more general in the community like increase their vulnerability to premature death. And then figuring out ways that Drum and other organizations in the community are working to reduce that vulnerability or risk already, and then maybe also plotting some pathways in the future for like places to develop. And so that's looked like on the ground, it looked like a variety of things. It started out with me doing semi-structured interviews, but kind of devolved into me just hanging out and canvassing with people, just like being part of the work. So taking more of like a power approach. And since my research is based in New York, a lot of the time when I'm here, it's turned out to look like co-writing. Something that we've been trying to center is like, what is some of the knowledge that's already being created in the community and how do we disseminate it both to scholarly academic audiences, but also how do we translate that for other communities facing similar vulnerabilities and risks. And so we've been practicing co-writing where I kind of like, support people in the community and from the organization to write up their learnings and their processes of doing this type of anti-police abolitionist work, to share some of the learnings that we've had in doing this type of thing. And that's been really successful. And it's been fun. And then also like what we're trying to do is like translate those writings back into the community. And that's taking the form of like some popular education tactics like skits or arts projects where people are like learning back from what we distilled or general.
So I could learn a lot from you about your method. So in addition to the project that I've been working on with Catie for the past year, I've also been working on this Bricks project for the past 3 years. And they complement each other really, really well because they're all about building out the local food system, but they're also separate projects. So I'll talk about the 3-year project. So as I mentioned, Bricks had approached me at the beginning of the pandemic. They wanted to be a partner with them on this project, this grant application essentially that they were applying for through the USDA. And we got the grant. It's funded in 3 years of basically community organizing work around increasing education and awareness and community involvement in the local food system. And so I'm bringing into the grant as a core. And part of that is that I'm basically like an event planner and like educational material promoter, creator. So what that looks like is Bricks and I hold monthly meetings and we kind of decide like what's the trajectory of what we want to get accomplished like over the next months or the next year. Like there's a lot of like creative brainstorming, like what could we do in the community that would just get people excited about local food. And so that's engendered like a different event series at a Bricks Cider, like some guest chef dinners or some science nights. And then I'm also like doing some research to write like blog posts about issues that we think like members might be interested in relating to like local food and ecology. So that's part of it. And then the other part is as a researcher, I'm sort of evaluating the program that we're doing as a whole. And some of that evaluation is directly back to the USDA program evaluation. So it's a little bit more technical, like how many people did we get out of these events. But a lot of that evaluation that's then forming the basis of my dissertation research is asking what are we doing that's really impacting the changes that we want to see in the food system? And what are those changes specifically? And like what are potential trade-offs or who are we engaging with or not engaging with? And those questions are more internal to Bricks. And so the research that I'm doing is sort of speaking directly back to like how Bricks can improve as a not only farm-to-table restaurant, but like an organized in the future. And so on the ground, what that looks like beyond these monthly meetings that design, also doing surveys, so people can come out to these events or just engage with Bricks programming. I'm doing a lot of I'm doing some document analysis. So every time that Bricks posts like a blog post online or some sort of like a social media post about the work we're doing, to like see how people are engaging with that. What else? yeah, I think that's primarily the methods. Yeah.
So following the questions that we share for preparing a little bit for this question might not apply much to you. So thinking about your research, what was your experience like initiating that, like whether that be with your advisors or coming up with this idea in community? And then, yeah, however you want to sense that.
Initiating a project.
Yeah.
How that worked. I think that once Briggs reached out to me and asked if I would be a partner, I was like, heck yeah, this is a great opportunity. And so the biggest piece of that was in talking to my advisors is about funding, how to get be supported. So I'm very fortunate in that Briggs wrote in funding for me through the grant project. So I had 4 semesters of an RA-ship that was written the grant. And then I had to find funding supplement the other 2 semesters of the 3-year project. So that there was a little bit of negotiation with my advisor what that looked like. But really they were just super supportive and see that I've been looking for something that was actually involved. So I feel like the conversation is pretty like, yes, go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, my process was much more goofy. I had some contact with Drum prior to going to New York City the first time to do research, but nothing substantive. What it really ended up looking like was a process of vetting me, I guess, is something that is important in like the South Asian Muslim Indo-Caribbean community after 9/11 was that a lot of the communities were infiltrated by the police or federal agents, and there was a lot of disruption in community relationships. And so as an organization, they were really anxious about letting in outsiders. And actually, I've also had like 4 experiences with academics in the past, where people would drop in and kind of like extract their labor and work and leave. And so what it ended up looking like was them behind the scenes, like researching me and looking at like contacting like mutual contacts that we knew. And they told this to me like after the fact. So I was just kind of hanging out in New York for like a week or 2. But from there it's developed into kind of like unveiled into like a series of these co-writing projects that we've worked on. And they are more like, what can you offer us in terms of your skills and your expertise? Because they are very much in the camp of like, we don't want to have to manage you. And so that's been something that I've had to learn of like, actually maybe it takes a little bit of my effort to also like go in with a project that they are also interested in, as opposed to that as giving me a project to work on. And so yeah, I've been trying to navigate that kind of balance of bringing in projects that relate to the interests of the organization and the community, while also attuning myself to their needs and interests.
Are you from New York?
I'm not. I'm from California.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was just curious how did you,
the organizers.
Yeah.
and the organization. Yeah, I met them through like doing political work in undergrad and after undergrad. And so we were running in the same circle politically, but maybe not so much socially.
right?
And so I think that jump took a second, but once it happened, it worked out.
So I've been doing some work, my funded work was through extension, through the Community Food Systems Program, towards the end of my first and second year, and around that time, I felt like that work was really important, which was sort of a larger, like national level look at food systems programs and extension, and I was really into that, but felt that I wanted to really get more into a community engaged context locally, especially closer to home. And so I was thinking about that, especially coming into my second year of the program, and then met Jules actually at an event sort of like this. It was just I don't know what the meetup was, but casual meet and greet, and And so we just started chatting, and then several months later, this grant opportunity came up, and I thought, oh, Mount Horeb would be really perfect for this, but I'm not working there, and I feel really uncomfortable just being like, I'm gonna come in with this grant project and be this person who, you know, even though I'm from here, a lot of people might not know who I am, and so I decided that it would be a really good idea to talk to someone who's already working in that context, and since Jules and I were friends at that time, it worked out really well for me to sort of piggyback on some of the partnerships that she had already spent a lot of time building to sort of get into that context. Luckily, we have a little bit of grant funding for ourselves for that work, but most of it we've really tried to push into the community. But my funded work through extension involves working on this sort of nascent Dane County food planning process that's ongoing, and really that just means I attend the meetings of the Dane County Food Council and you know, help them a little bit with grant writing they're working on. But that work has sort of been away from, it dovetails really nicely with the Mount Horeb work, so it feels like I'm being supported financially to do this work, even though I'm not getting directly paid for my time on that. So that has definitely enabled me to do cool things with it.
Yeah. For all of you, how do you navigate the logistics of community engagement? So anything from like some of that finding funding, but also like compensating community partners, or that justifying your time spent on relationship building, those sorts of things. Whoever wants to start with that.
I can just keep it rolling. So I was just saying, we've for this grant that we got, it was $10,000, and Jules and I each took 2,500 of that, so a quarter each, which seems like a lot, but we've spent a lot of time on this project.
I haven't actually done any of my own research.
Lived, and so, yeah, our goal with the grant was really to just give as much of the money to the community as possible. And so, for example, one of the things that we did was we offered to pay community members to participate in the workshop at the rate of $25 an hour. And it was a 3-hour workshop, and then we included an hour of commuting time, so $100 check to come to this workshop, which most people weren't expecting at all. We offered it as an option because sometimes financial compensation is actually not what community members are looking for. And I think we had about half of the folks who attended the workshop take us up on that. And so maybe less than I would have expected, but that's great, because then we can put that money towards other community things as sort of seed money for the next stages of the work. But we also really wanted to prioritize paying our community partner, Brick Cider. And so we held a workshop there and paid them to rent the space and also prepare food for lunch. So we also gave complimentary lunch to our workshop participants, which felt really valuable as another way of valuing their time. And I actually think that was what got a lot of people in the door, is to get this great like farm to table food, and that felt good, because then, you know, the money we're paying for some of that ends up going back to the farmers who they get their food from. So it felt like a really nice way to sort of, you know, round out the funding piece there. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's good enough for me.
I'll sit on
Okay. Yeah, I've had a lot of difficulty navigating the logistics. Partly because I haven't been funded like exclusively for my work, which we should talk about in the future. But yeah, I think it's looked like me, like, I think the question of like compensating community members for their time has been like really on top of my mind. And I think what it's looked like for me is just trying to compensate through my labor or like my expertise. And so I think when I was in New York, when I am in New York doing research, I try to spend a lot of my time just like either like supporting like canvassing efforts in the community, or just like working with the organizers and community members to like do what they need to do. And then kind of like squeeze my research aspect in in like the little in-between times, which actually seems all of those in-between times, even if they are only like 15 minutes at a time, are like have been much more generative than the semi-structured interviews that I carried out when I first started my research. And so I'm trying to think about how to like communicate that's the type of like method that I think I want to forward. But yeah.
That's on my mind too.
Yeah, but that's like the major logistic effort. I think there's like another logistic thing about like doing research in New York City, which is like really expensive compared to Wisconsin. And so like navigating some of the funding as a graduate student has been really difficult. And it looks like a lot of like planning through the semester and kind of like budgeting for the summers when I do my research. But I think like doing like co-writing over Zoom or like interviews over Zoom has been kind of offsetting some of that. And then finally, I think that's it for now, yeah.
Yeah, so for the Bricks project, I compensate community members when it's something that's to do with my research and not necessarily to do with like the organizing work. With Bricks, and in order to compensate them, I've applied for multiple small grants with some internal PW. So like the Reynolds grant, the Morgridge Center grant, and those all provide you little pockets of funding to be able to pay community members. Other logistical things, it's like the IRB process. So in applying for the IRB, I worked with my advisor who really helped me with this to use really loosely structured language so that pretty much anything to do with like conversations around the food system and that work can fall under the IRB approval. And that's been really useful because now, you know, I have to go through this formal process the first time that I interview or talk to a community member, and I have to get their oral consent for IRB. But once they give me that consent, then I can continue talking to them under that IRB approval, and I don't have to like, you know, give them the IRB form every single time I talk to them. So that's really helpful when I talk to these people like multiple times. I also trying to record some interviews, and sometimes recording is helpful, like if it's with me, one of the owners of Bricks, is very aware that I'm doing this research and stuff. But I quickly found out that it was like very awkward to like put a recorder down with people that I like would just be like chilling with at the bar at Bricks, like no matter what. And so they're like, I show a recorder, they're like, what are you doing? Like, we were just having a regular conversation, and no, the recorder's here. So I found that like having those conversations and then being really field notes, it's been a better method for me. What else? Oh, and then another thing logistically is one of the Bricks project team leaders is on my dissertation committee, and that's felt really, really helpful. Just in terms of like grounding my community and keeping the focus of the dissertation research less on my academic output and more on like how is this research speaking back to Bricks and this project. Lovely to watch like the community member be on this panel with a bunch of faculty members, and like the faculty can kind of get it up in the air a little bit and he'll bring them back down here. But no, this is actually like in real time playing out with me. That's really helpful.
I think, so the question is regarding like compensation and challenges.
Yeah, or that's.
I think in terms of like logistics, I think a big difficult part for me is navigating post scheduling and everything around assessment at the same time as a graduate program. And I'm in a master's program, so I don't necessarily have like the research like project in terms of my degree right now. But that has been difficult, just like managing that. And I think with compensation also like trying to figure out the best way to like get community partners the compensation that they should be getting, and also like considering like logistical things being part of the university. Yeah.
So more questions are here. I'm wondering if you want to play Q&A now, and then like see. All the other questions as many times.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Vignesh, I would love to hear more about the co-writing process
Yeah.
and like what feels really like salient to you. What's working really well, like what's cool about it or.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I've been
Like you all have turned it to.
Yeah.
like, he's like some dream. I've been working on like two projects that are writing and like kind of separate from my research, but a little related. One is, both are about like abolition and abolition. One is like for a peer reviewed journal, that had put out a call about, abolition feminisms, and I was like, oh, like, this seems to be exactly what drum is practicing already, maybe we should just like write about it. And so that piece, is coming out next month, I think, yeah, and it's been a really interesting, three of us working on it, we're talking about drums, domestic violence prevention work. And we're really trying to engage some of the academic literature about, what does abolition look like, academic literature, which there's a lot of thoughts about, but also like, what we really wanted to center was, how is this like theoretical and, practice, and also like practice, like emerging from the community without intervention from the academic sphere. And I think we've done a really good job at that, and also like communicating some lessons or learnings that we want to share with other communities that are facing similar problems. I think challenges in that project has been the peer review process, where people are really interested in like how we're intervening the scholarly literature, where like that wasn't our intervention or like, even maybe purpose of writing the piece. Which I think like my reflection on that is like maybe this isn't those outlets for like co-writing. It's like I don't think that we should do co-writing for like double blind peer review process. The other project I've been working on is a book chapter for a book on border abolition, and again like we're trying to summarize some of Drum's work in the context of border abolition. And that's been really awesome, and I think we are more politically aligned with the people editing the book. And again, we're doing a similar thing where we are summarizing case studies and lessons from community organizing that Drum is already doing, and like situating it within some of the academic literature around border abolition or like other like projects of border abolition. And I think that one feels slightly better because we are in conversation with the people we want to be in conversation with. And I think in the future, that's how I want to situate co-writing is there. I don't think there's, we want to practice co-writing in places where we feel welcomed and like are in a community to practice with, as opposed to like making these really like negative interventions of like, this is what's wrong with the field and this is how it needs to change. I don't think that's as productive or generative to the project. Like the political project.
Is that like a conscious or intentional conversation that you all have together?
I think it's emerging. I think like, as we finish up this peer reviewed piece, I think they're both technically peer reviewed. As we finish up the double blind peer reviewed piece, I think we're learning what we appreciate about that process, and I think maybe our critiques of the scholarly kind of bend to it. Whereas like I'm working with one of the two partners in this other chapter, and I think we're just having fun, which I think is maybe we were having fun in the beginning of the other piece too, but it quickly turned into like very serious. And I think what we realized is like we don't want that necessarily in our work.
So as the one like situated on the academic side of things. Do you play a different role? Like when you said we are engaged with the literature, does that mean sort of you bring some ideas, and sort of translate, not that people can't like figure it out on their own, but they don't probably have time. So do you do that translational work and then they respond and then like talk more lived experience, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so the way we started it was like starting from lived experience and like writing about that, and we're like, this is the scholarship, or this should be the scholarship. I think what it's like quickly translated into has been like me writing the literature review. And then like supplementing that with some of this lived experience work. And then like us getting back feedback again, like actually like the lived experience stuff is the content, not the literature review. Which I think again is like maybe some we just approach it differently of like what we think the literature is. Yeah, and so I think it's partly due to like the nature of libraries and academic scholarship of like not being able to access it if you're not in this institution like this. It's been me just like summarizing a lot of that, and like bringing it to the group, and then like we look at it together and like, you know, change the language if necessary. But like, I think like what we've realized is that there's nothing new in the academic work that's not already being practiced in the work on the ground. And I think that's like one of the major learnings that we've had during this process. And so like we want to communicate, but like have been struggling how to do that in an institutional way. Because it seems like the people we need to communicate that to are also the ones not listening. So it's like, yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. This is, I'm learning a lot. But one question I had for Vignesh and also Jules is, how do community partners see their relationship with the university? Because I can see that, I mean, if academics are telling a story that like A, you already know, or B, has nothing whatsoever to do with your lived experience, there's any issue, why should we trust you? And how do we cultivate that trust and like say, okay, like this is what we should be listening to in our academic work?
I think that, so the owners, both owners of Greg's, who I've known for a long time now, they are both graduates of master's programs at UW. And so they already, like long before this partnership emerged, already understood the world of academia and have lived it. And I think because of that, they understand how to navigate the partnership pretty well. When they approached me to be a partner on this grant, they were very explicit in saying, we think that having you on this grant is actually going to legitimize our application and make it like more competitive for money. So they saw right there like a strategic partnership in place. Since then, I think they've really been thinking about the partnership in terms of, and this is also something I've brought to our conversations, like leveraging the resources that the university has to bring into the community. Like Catie talked about a lot, how can I get more funding from the university and bring it to Brookside or the network community, what like knowledge or conversations can I bring that are relevant to the conversations that were coming out there. So I think that they're viewing this partnership in terms of sort of like bridging the abundance of resources that UW has and changing it to the network community in really productive ways. And then there's also like, you know, I have in line with that, I have access to like just like things like online platforms that the university pays for that they wouldn't have, that I can then use to do some of our evaluation work. I have access to students, so I've gotten like undergrads to do a bunch of like labor projects, you know, and that's been really helpful. So yeah, I think that's kind of the primary perspective or lens.
If I could just chime in really quick too, I also feel, so Jules knew Matt and Marie, the owners of Bricks, long before starting her program, and I think they also see in Jules, they trust her as a scholar who's really committed to community engagement and to really bringing that work back to the community. And so I think it's sort of the way that Jules, you know, shows that commitment is a really important part of why they trust her in that context, and the sort of years of relationship building that she's bringing to it.
Yeah, I think drum is a little bit more ambivalent. That's what we're called to university. The way I've been approaching it is again through the framework of popular education. It's like an education framework that basically starts with the lived experiences of people, generalizes like learning from those experiences, and then tries to reapply like those learnings into the community. And so I think we've been seeing like the co-writing process, especially as part of that generalization of like, this is already happening, this is how we're distilling it. And maybe these are strategies to like re-implement or like implement like new tactics in the community. Depending on like whether, yeah, depending on like what we're talking about. And I think the other thing that they see me as, I think trust was really important. I think what they lacked before in like their previous collaborations with academic partners was like they never showed up again or they never saw the results of the work. And so I think like for me, like the popular education framework, there's like this direct intention of like plugging back into the community, whether or not it's they read the peer-reviewed article, like that's not what's important to me. It's like whether we take these learnings, distill them, and then like are able to reapply them. I'm personally, I'm ambivalent about the university, so like, I think that's maybe another like learning in this process.
You're doing all this really critical evaluation work around like how from what I understand, like how the resources of Morgridge are supporting the work that like community-based research and community science. And I'm wondering, I know that you're doing these interviews for speed discipline and like focus groups with faculty. And like I'm wondering what some of the key takeaways you found are for either like what faculty or people doing this work need, or what Morgridge is providing, or you also mentioned the focus is like how to better support BIPOC students. Learning through your role.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, so right now, I have only met with like a limited number of like faculty and community partners. But through meeting with one community partner, something that stood out to me was they mentioned, so this course was a civil engineering course, and they actually worked with the course as a mentor. And so like one of the things that I heard from them when I asked like what do you feel like we're missing, or what do you feel like could change to like benefit students? And they said like making this like some like the kind of project that they're doing for this course, making it earlier in the trajectory and like figuring out how we could do that so that they could have like extended version of that experience throughout their undergrad. And I think that's something else. I think I also heard that from a faculty member in a different department. So I think like looking at how community-based learning courses and just like the community engagement piece can also be integrated into earlier courses for students, and like like for sophomores or like maybe second semester freshmen rather than just seniors. I think that could be really beneficial, but there's a lot of logistical pieces to work around with for that. But and then in terms of like, I think with working and like looking at how we can better support like BIPOC students, I think we're still working on like building relationships with folks. And we're looking at like what kind of content would really like challenge them and like support them in a way that they need. I don't know. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I feel so interesting, like making the capstone course or community-based learning not just something you tack on the end of your university career, but like it's really integrated through. If you take these courses in the beginning, freshman or sophomore, then you're thinking about like not only community engagement, but also the relationship with like who you are as in the university within your community throughout the rest of the time. And that feels like a no-brainer. Like, yeah, we should be doing that.
That time thing, yeah, just the amount like during the semester versus imagine like so much shifts. I think students might be prompted to see themselves and in their own community from semester to semester, year, like, and I think like it really continued that way.
you.
Okay.
So we're in this master's program for counseling psychology, and you've been doing community engaged, you've been involved with Morgridge for a long time, it seems. Curious, sort of what do you see as your next step? And how does that relate to all this great work that you?
Ooh, I like this question. So I think in terms of next steps, so when I was applying to grad school, I also applied to PhD program. And like my research that I'm interested in, or like that I would potentially be interested in doing is like looking at, and I guess just the community that I'm like really interested in working with is the immigrant community, and like especially specifically those that have been impacted by like deportation or immigration, and just like the criminalization of immigration. And so in terms of like next steps, I would really want to figure out how, like, I thought about maybe doing another master's with like creating nonprofit leadership and like creating like a nonprofit to specifically provide resources to that community, in like the mental health area field perspective, I think, just because there's a lot of mental health stigma around like mental health care and stuff, but that's something that I've thought about, and I think just working with the community to like better, like to decrease that stigma, I think, and like really build relationships with like academia and yeah, I think my future and like next steps is still to be like to be determined, but I think the perspective and the lens that I've gained through working with the Morgridge Center, and having like this perspective of like self-awareness and positionality, and like looking at like the different levels of like power that exists and like that exists, and how they may influence different. That's been very helpful and beneficial to my career, and also just like to like better understand people that I'm engaging. So I hope that. Yeah, yeah, I'm like, maybe I'm just like bothering. No.
That's a one more question. What more could be happening on campus to either in the Morgridge Center or in your departments, whatever, to support community engagement amongst graduate students?
Okay, I've got a half thought out right there.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, I just really like your concept about not making community engagement something that's like tacked on to the end of, a program, or like we've had this conversation, like a box to be checked, but really making it like deeply authentic to the research that's happening at the university. And so I don't know if that looks like just conversations or curriculum or what, but like really approaching community engagement in a intentional way throughout the course of the program. And that's something else that I've been thinking a lot about. A challenge that I have been sort of playing out in my mind is how community engagement or like community engaged research also necessitates boundaries, and what those boundaries need to look like, in like as a grad student, but also as a human being. So for example, I started working out at Bricks as sort of a way to separate my whole self from my grad student self, and like be embedded in a community that wasn't related to the work as a grad student. And now 3 years later, like it's all a blog, and every day I'm out for some time, and sometimes I'm a community member, and sometimes I'm a researcher, and usually I'm both. And I've been navigating like, what do those boundaries need to look like? Like, when am I doing research, or when am I just out there to enjoy my friend's time? And I think that that's a conversation that often gets lost in the fray in academia. And so like, in some ways it's like approaches to doing this kind of work, what does that look like? And that can maybe be a conversation on campus, but also just sort of like, how do you know when you need to pull out that reporter to a community member, like just logistical things like that. Yeah, I would appreciate more communications and resources around those things.
Something else like I've seen, I agree with you, and like, I think with that, something else I've seen is that especially graduate students are really looking to be involved in the community. And like, just like lack the connections to do so, like a lot of graduate students are not from Wisconsin.
What are faculty either?
Or their faculty, yeah. And so like for example, like I'm working with like the Center for Humanities, like on a project with the Union Cab of Madison. And that's been great because I feel really disconnected like with communities in Madison, and this has been like a really great way to like connect with taxi cab drivers and like, you know, dispatchers and mechanics. And you know, it's not like, I don't know like what the long-term collaboration is gonna look like, but I'm glad to have been building this collaboration and connection this semester. And I think like facilitating some of those exchanges, where like I'm meeting a need that they have. And you know, like maybe this will develop into something longer term. Like I think there's a lot of potential for that with community organizations around Madison, but also around Wisconsin and working properly.
What would that look like? How could that look? So you found that those projects.
Yeah,
Other ways you think will find community, or specifically right grad students.
yeah. I think there's something about like, maybe there's something that we can do, like, you know, like Center for Humanities or like Morgridge Center, like working with community organizations and like identifying like semester-long needs. Because I think, you know, there's more than enough funding on campus to like support a grad student or stipend a grad student to work on I'm working on an oral history project, which is fun. I have the skills to do that and I enjoy doing that. And like there are definitely grad students who are more equipped to do that. But like, yeah, like working with community partners to identify those like really easy needs and like kind of like expanding, that will like expand capacity for these organizations. Might be like one way to go about that.
How do you all like, do you all typically find like funding opportunities once you do like things getting emailed to you? Like, is there a place you all go to look first? Like, okay, like can we post things anywhere as we get them? Because usually that's what Haley and I are doing, are pushing around little projects and like that come up from people. But I think like trying to figure out who has the capacity and is looking for that funding. Or just a project who now is able to fund it, there could be other mechanisms. Just that's what I'm wondering a little bit.
Well, as we're talking about this and wondering about this, I feel like there's a lot of effort to build partnerships with the community, but and that seems really important. My impression though is also that students might already have ideas or like partnerships that they can build with communities that are important to them. So I wonder like how often is it the case that students are coming looking for a community to work with versus they just don't know about Morgridge Center and so they don't maybe know like how to engage with that community or that they could engage with the community as a method or as a research. So I don't know if that's sort of a subtle distinction, but it just occurred to me as we were talking. We are probably bringing a lot of relationships through their own personal histories. Because I feel like, so the master's program in planning or many master's programs are pretty structured, like there are courses you have to take until my second year, because I just didn't really know about it. And so I wonder, to me, it seems like what are the ways to really get to grad students as soon as possible, all across campus, so that they know about Morgridge's resources, because I've told so many people about CP 601, and they're like, well, I'm in my second year, I'm about to graduate, like, or my course schedule is already set, I don't have to fit that in. In which case then the community engagement becomes sort of tack on. And so, yeah, I don't know what the ways are to do that better, but it does feel like especially for the master's students at UW, hitting them really early with it. It's important.
That makes me think about, I know we're just like running out of time, but quickly, like in geography, all incoming masters and PhD students have to take like an intro to the department class and where we talk about like research methods. And what if it was like part of that class that we're talking about like developing that research project, like, oh, and the Morgridge Center is a great place to engage. And Nelson Institute has a similar, like all incoming students have to take one sort of intro to the department course, like talking to department. Yeah, you could literally just be like a line, drop the syllabus or drop the do it.
And I think just how, especially for folks who do want to go and be in academics, like. There's not many opportunities to really learn about all the things that are on your campus, like unless you're actively. Really doing a lot, actually doing a lot actually.
Maybe like a bank of like graduate students going.
Oh,
People need like website development all the time, and like, people need like world.
Yeah, does anyone here wanna do a coding, well, not even coding really, but like a basic web class with the center, the Progress Center for Black women?
What is that?
They're looking for, I think, like really basic computer training, like, you know, Word, email, like things I think most of us could probably do.
Yeah.
I think they're focused on a population of like Black youth, Black male youth. But I don't think that's like a specific criteria, they're looking for like a Black person to do the training. So I can get you more details when anyone's like.
I don't know if I'd be the.
I would say, I don't know, of this group, I don't know who has capacity, but, yeah. Want to fish them out, but we're also, gosh, through our networks for best fishing that stuff out and how we put those in most useful places.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I guess we technically are at time, a little over, okay. I'll stop the recording, feel free to like grab bagels and keep chatting.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. I love it. You love it.